big. It's holidays, it's birthdays, anniversaries, big celebrations. But in my new career, choice and professional development facilitator, I found that some of the most valuable celebrations are the everyday things. We made it this morning to Toastmasters at 7 a.m. And what I've learned is that neuroscience research has shown that when we celebrate those seemingly small accomplishments that we make, it teaches our brain to do it more often. I can't think of it as a dog. It's like giving ourselves a little treat, like, I'll do that again. It really develops those neurological connections. And I'm not a scientist, so don't ask me the details of that. But it works. It works. I've seen it work. I have to believe in the power of it. Today, we get to talk about celebrations. And I thought it would be fun. I'm going to read these throughout the day. I have found this many pages of celebrations that go on just this month, in December. So I'm just going to read a few to get. Good morning.
Hi.
So December 1st is National Christmas Lights Day. The 2nd is Chanukah. The 2nd is also National Mutt Day. And the 3rd is National Disability Day. The 4th is National Cookie Day. The 5th is International Ninja Day. The 5th is also National Gazpacho Day and International Civil Aviation Day. Introduce you to those as we go along. Grammarian. Larry is our grammarian today. Would you tell us about your word? You may come up here.
Oh.
Or you can stand in place. Either way. I know.
So the word of the day is rapture, and I did choose that because I felt it went with the season and the theme of celebration. Don't get it mixed up with raptor, like some have. But rapture is an emotion that lifts you up and transports you elsewhere. Probably the closest words are ecstatic joy, delight, and bliss. And it's an experience of being carried away by a high emotion. It's a mystical experience, some would say. And in some Christian theology, it's at the end times when everybody is lifted up to heaven.
It sounds like a name of a perfume or a nail polish. Our timer today is Lori. Share a bit.
My job as timer is to time the speech, which is 5 to 7,
6 to 8.
6 to 8. So I'll have this rapturous green at 6, the ecstatic yellow at red, and unbelievable red. Or excuse me, I can't do my colors. Red, this is red, apple yellow, green. And for tabletop, it's 1, 2, and 3. No, 1, 1.5, and 2. Yes, I'll get it. And
Thank
I
you,
just
Lori.
my challenge is to remember the time and to stop the timer at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Kathleen is our tabletop master today.
Today, I would like you to use your imagination. For starters, this is not a stick. Think about what it might be instead.
And our general evaluator is Krista.
I will be evaluating the Toastmaster and also the evaluator for the speech, along with giving my impression of how the meeting went and how we can improve it.
Thank you. And our first and only speaker of the day is Laura Lee Norris. And Laura Lee has collected many letters behind her name already at this early stage of life. She's got 2 associate degrees, and she has 2 certifications, accomplishments from Toastmasters. She's an Advanced Communication Silver and Advanced Leadership Silver. And this say, I feel like at a young age, she has collected a lot of experiences and had a lot of accomplishments. And this speech that she's going to give today is also a very monumental experience in a little different way. I'm really touched that she's willing to share it with us and let us experience it with her. The title of the speech is 8:01 a.m. The purpose is a speech of praise, and the length is 6 to 8 minutes. You're welcome, Carly.
Time is a fascinating thing. We assume that we can predict the future. Not plan for the future, but predict it. Planning, we see, means that you do what you can do to achieve a goal. Predicting the future, however, means that you know for absolute certainty that this is going to happen and nothing is going to change that. If there is one thing that I have learned, it is that predicting the future is truly futile. June 10th, 2014, 7:38 a.m. There were 7 shots fired. This is at Reynolds High School, which is in Troutdale, Portland, for those who don't know the little town of Troutdale. And the timestamps that I'm about to tell you were got from Twitter, or were taken from Twitter, if I speak English correctly. This was the moment, in one single moment, in one single decision, and one single word, that changed my entire life. At 8:01 a.m., you hear on the loudspeaker, code red, active shooter, this is not a drill. I am in my 7th period class, even though it's 8:01 a.m., because this is finals week. And so you go through all your classes backwards. Why don't I? I'm in what are called the pods. I'm outside the building. And where we are, the main building is here. The PE building is here. Very much like at Newport High School, where there's a breezeway between the East and West campus. Same difference. My teacher that I'm with at this moment is Mr. Shanty. We are in a classroom that does not have a lock on the door, does not have a window, only has one way out. He moves his chair to be right in front of the door. So he is the first person that anyone coming through that door will see. At this point, we are pulling kids from outside. School has not started yet. School starts at 8:20. So people are still getting off the bus at this point. So we are literally pulling kids who aren't supposed to be in our classroom into the classroom as they're trying to get into the main building. So what do kids do when they're worried? They pull out their phone because they want as much information as they can. Granted, this is my phone that I had at this point, which was securely in my locker because I was a good student off and away. Meaning I didn't have access to a phone, but lots of other kids were not good students who had their phone with them. And they're doing this. They're on Twitter, and one of the students says, someone's been shot. And we're going, okay, where? Mr. Rispler has been shot. Mr. Rispler was my teacher. He was my health teacher. And first thing that goes into my mind when he says that is, shit, he's in the main building. because Mr. Rissler's class that I'm in is in the main building, meaning he can get into the commons, meaning he can get into all the students who are coming in. He wasn't, by the way. I didn't know this, but he wasn't. And it seemed like forever sitting there with our little phones. We have all the lights off because we're trying to pretend like we don't exist. We weren't that quiet. However, we're going through with Twitter and we're trying to figure out where things are happening. And when this first happened, we thought this was seniors, high school seniors, who are celebrating with fireworks. Oh. So we hear on the door. I thought, great, he's here. Except for then I was like, shooters would not knock on the door. That's kind of simple. It was the police. And they were coming to evacuate us. So we run across, just like this, across the street to the church that was, and we're getting searched once, and again, and again. You have no idea how many cars can fit on a street until you see fire engines and police cars and police buses and National Army, and we have as many people as we can fit. So we're a school of 3,000 students. Then we have staff. We're all being crowded into this parking lot across the street. And as I'm waiting, I decided by unfortunate circumstances to wear these boots with high heels. Of course, I'm going to be standing in a parking lot in high heels for hours. My feet were not very appreciative of this fact, by the way. And my phone is sitting in my locker. I had no way to call my parents. I had no way to tell them I was alive. I had no way to tell them to come get me. Granted, there's lots of other people who have phones, so I begged to phone off another person, who I didn't know, by the way. And I called my dad. I didn't think about at that time that my dad lived here in Newport. I just happened to call my dad. And by somehow, he was there in Portland because he couldn't sleep the night before. At 10:40 a.m., they announced the shooter is dead. And after being interviewed and waiting for what seemed like ever, 2 o'clock, I was on a police bus to Fred Meyer's, where my dad was standing waiting in the crowd. I had been asked if I would choose to forget what happened. I don't want to forget what happened, even though it was scary, it was sad. There were a lot of heroes that day. Our town came together to stand as one that day, and a drop of a dime, they rerouted public transportation. Buses that were supposed to be in Portland public transportation, very, very busy, came to pick us up, to take us home, to get us to be safe. Churches opened their doors, candlelight services, and our rival teams sent messages saying that we stand with you today. Was it scary? Yes. After the adrenaline was over, yes. It was scary. When I'm standing at the church, staring at the lines and lines, thousands, literally thousands of students and teachers who were walking through those lines, and I didn't know if my friends were going to be in those lines. And I didn't know if my teachers were going to be in those lines or not. And I didn't know if Mr. Ristler was dead or if he was shot and alive. It was scary. But I learned to appreciate the beauty around me. And I know that life can end in a single moment. I'm grateful that I got to come home that day. Because not everyone did. And I remember that father, that could have been my father, walked up and down to every bus. His son didn't come home that day. I thank God that my dad was in town and could sit in those crowds of people. He doesn't like crowds, but he stood there for hours and hours, 7 hours, waiting for me to come home. And I'm proud of my mom for staying with her students and keeping them safe. They were also on lockdown with a gun that was coming up past the middle school. And I'm grateful for all of the prayers and messages that my friends in my community sent to me afterwards. I'm grateful I get to continue my story and help others write their story. I'm going to end, even though I know I'm over time, with what I wrote on Facebook that night. It wasn't nearly as deep as I had thought it was. As I was sitting in my classroom, not knowing where the shooter was or what was happening, I prayed for comfort and protection. And I know it was that.
We have a moment to write your comments. I'm entertaining you with a few more holidays. The 7th of December is National Cotton Candy Day, National Letter Writing Day, National Pearl Harbor Day of Remembrance. The 8th is National Bartender Day, National Brownie Day, National Llama Day is the 9th. The 9th is also National Pastry Day. All for that. Let's see. Yeah, the 10th is National Lager Day. Today is the 11th, right? International Mountain Day. That is all there is today. One, International Mountain Day. Recognize your favorite mountain. Celebrate your favorite mountain. On we go to table topics. And let's see, since we don't have a second speaker today, we could just have some. Well, gosh, it's already 7:27, so we'll have a few table topics.
I think I'll stay here. Just because at school, one of the things that the kids like to do is to be given a prop and then told to use their imagination for what this possibly be. Today, I would like you to consider a stick, what it might be, and when you might use it. For example, this is not a stick, an umbrella. This is not a stick, it's a guitar. Somebody, I'm going to have you volunteer for this first one. All right, it's not a stick.
This is actually an historical artifact. Not a whole lot of people know that the original St. Nicholas was a bishop. When he went to the Council of Nicaea, he had a crozier. The crozier had a hook on it. But St. Nicholas got mad at one of the other people at that council and hit him over the head with his crozier and broke it. St. Nicholas was a kindly man. He really did love children. He had a lot of issues, but he was very serious about his faith. And there was an argument at that time between bishops, and the bishop that had the effrontery to say that the Virgin Mary wasn't a perpetual virgin. And St. Nicholas took offense at that. He clobbered him with the crozier and ended up spending the rest of the Council of Nicaea in a jail cell. And then after his side won the argument, they let him out of the jail cell, and he got to go back to Myra, which is present-day Turkey. St. Nicholas is noted for loving children. Now, he never used his crozier on children. A lot of people don't realize that he was orphaned himself when he was like 7 years old. And he went to live in a monastery with several monks, and that's where he got his education. And by the time he was 18 years old, he was already a priest. By the time he was 20 years old, he was a bishop. This is in present day, what's present day Turkey. He really did have an affinity for children. In those days, children couldn't, especially female children, couldn't get married unless they had enough money for a dowry. And he had a lot of wealth that he inherited from his parents. His parents were rich merchants, but they died from the plague. And he used that wealth to help his community. And the story was that this gentleman had 2 daughters that he couldn't afford to get married off. And so St. Nicholas, when the oldest one came time, put a bundle of gold coins in a stocking, and he threw it down the chimney. And that's where we get that. And then a couple years later, when it was the other daughter's time to go, again, threw another stocking full of gold down the chimney. It was supposed to have not been anonymous, or supposed to have been anonymous, but somebody saw him and spread the story. And that's where we get that custom of having the stockings by the chimney. The candy canes that we put on that thing, that is in remembrance of his crozier, as the bishop's crozier. We have a very real person, not the Santa Claus that we celebrate all year long, but a very real person with very human emotions, that really did love kids, and he wasn't afraid to use his crozier.
Lee, you swallow. This is not a stick. What is this? Talk about you using it.
For a second, this is a cane. While I stand up and let my back adjust. This is not a stick. It is a clothing peg. Last week, some of you may have seen a play that was done on Saturday and Sunday called A Mall and the Night Visitors. I did the set construction of the project. The director came in and said, we need a place for Amal and his mother to hang their coats. And he had anticipated this would look like wooden pegs driven into between the stones of the wall. Well, the wall happened to be about that thick plywood. So I was able to take a piece of wood, drill holes in it, cut a dowel into short pieces, stick them into the holes, and then mount that piece on the wall. So this stick, dowel, became clothing pegs.
Right there.
So next time you look at a stick, imagine it being straight and round, cut into 4 or 5 inch pieces, put into drilled holes in the wall, and you'll have a place to hang your hat.
And we all know that Larry teaches writing. So I assume you've got a great imagination. This is not a stick, it is a...
Well, I don't need imagination to see a baseball. My friends and I made one just like this one when I was, 12 years old maybe. But we it was kind of a family project. We made it out of my mom's broom handle by cutting it with my dad's saw. And we would play in the backyard. We had a small, narrow backyard. We used a golf ball that was a plastic golf ball, so the ball would really be hard to hit with a little broom handle. When we went out there to play one day, my mom said, "Be careful of my rose bush." Now, Mom didn't even like roses, but somebody had brought her a rose bush, and she planted it, unfortunately, very close to our baseball home plate. So Rocky was pitching. It's like the bottom of the 7th inning. We played 7-inning games. There was only 2 players on each side. Rocky threw a pitch. I swung at it and just hit the bottom of the ball with the top of the bat, and it popped it up over near the rose bush. Well, the game was on the line, and Rocky went charging for that baseball, dove for it, got it in his hands, and slid right across the bush and just crushed that bush. And the ball bobbled in his hands and hit the ground, and then Rocky picked it up. Well, Mom had a sixth sense about things. And before Rocky even climbed off the ground, Mom was standing there with her hands on her hips. And, well, let's say we didn't play baseball in the backyard much after that anymore.
Svetlana, I can't hand this. What?
Adam,
We're done?
we're there.
Yeah, we do one more? Wanna do it?
Well, okay.
Next time, Svetlana.
Okay, yes, yeah. We're gonna do that.
You sure you send your votes?
Your votes. Thank you, Kathleen Ritzman, for that creative table topic. Event. I think we should celebrate it. Yay! This is the other thing about celebration is when you actually expose your armpits, like, yay! It's more powerful. It actually helps those little neurons be built even more in your brain. So this is something that I have learned to do and teach my clients. Every once in a while, just say, yay! I have been so caught up in the rapture of being Toastmaster this morning that I fear I've been remiss in introducing a guest. I assume he's with Kathleen and Lee.
Hello, Toastmasters. This is our son, Mark. He lives in Virginia. He is a computer programmer. And while he was living here with us, he was also a member of Toastmasters. So it's good to have him here with us for a week.
Nice. Thank you. A little late, but better late than never. Thank you. Okay, our speech evaluator for Lower Lee will be Brian Haggerty.
Thank you. Madam Toastmaster. That certainly is an impactful speech. I feel that with some work, that might be a speech that you could carry some distance. So I'm going to focus maybe a little bit more on things I'd like to see changed. I'd like to hear this speech again. And the main thing, perhaps the first thing, is I'd like to feel the timeline more, because it seems important to me that so much could happen in such a relatively short period of time. And then so little happens for such a long period of time. I did think it was great bringing up things like wearing high heels and having to stand for a long period of time, essentially doing nothing but uncomfortable on those heels. That's brings this mundane fact into a day that is so impactful for you. I would have liked to know a little bit more about Mr. Rispler. You know, what was his day like? That would be, that to me would be kind of a key, a central portion of the story. The evaluation sheet here says this was supposed to be about an individual, and I don't know if maybe his day might fit into a celebration of that. I am always impressed to learn about the teachers in these school shootings and how well they actually do appear to care about their students. I mean, even to the point of sometimes putting their lives on the line in order to handle the situation. You're always a good presence at the lectern. You have a good voice, and you use good inflection, you use good gestures. I was really interested in that reaction of younger people. It's a generational thing. When something is happening, they reach their phones. And you might sort of press that a little bit harder, because that's very striking for me. My phone would be the last thing I would be thinking about at that kind of a situation. So to my thinking, I'd like to see you restructure the speech a little bit and either establish the timeline up front and then fill in details, or let the timeline be your structure for the speech. And that latter, I think, might be the better approach, because then you could establish the timeline and be filling in details. And I suspect that what you would be filling in would be fairly telling. I mean, you know, up front there's this critical situation going on, and then at the end there is just a lot of waiting and worrying. Watching that father walk up and down the line, that's really, really gets me as a father. I mean, that would be the worst day of your life. So, but it is a wonderful speech, and I would encourage you to continue to work on this one and really brush it up. I think that might be it might take you all the way to the top. I was supposed to wait up there.
You were. She might be. Okay. Good. We will celebrate your performance anyway. Our timers report is from Lauren.
I will admit, I was so caught up in the rapture of the speeches, the table topics, that I did not do a very good job of recording the times. Laura Lee, year 6 to 8, stretched to 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Brian gets the award for consistently long evaluation, 4 minutes and 14 seconds. Dave, I completely spaced on starting my watch with you. It was pretty long. Lee talked for 1 minute and 22 seconds. I was actually just about to put the green up when you noticed that. And Larry talked for 2 minutes and 16 seconds. So still within the time.
And Kathleen, would you tell us who our table topic winner is so we can celebrate their achievement?
All right. Today we get to celebrate again. Forgive me for being here. I'm rough luck. But it's very easy to give this a birthday because it goes to Larry.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for
I'm sorry.
Do the crest. And we'll keep Larry in the spotlight with the grammarian report.
Okay, well, thank you. So really, I didn't hear any except for when I was speaking, and I didn't have time to write those down. We mentioned rapture more often than we mentioned soul, which I thought everybody's speeches were really clean, and I just think everybody here, everyone is an excellent speaker here. I thought it was great when Laura Lee used the word gotten and then quickly changed it, right in front of us. I think that works great. There were some great lines in your speech, Laura Lee, and that one about the father walking up and down, that really gets to the core of everybody's fear. And it came after you were looking for your friends. So it really, I think, very emotional, great line in that speech. And I'm grateful I get to continue my story, and we are too. Thanks.
And our general evaluator report is from Krista.
Madam Toastmaster, if I may, from
You
here.
may.
You did a fantastic job. So I love your enthusiasm with how you started the meeting and your great theme. I love that the grammarian tied that in too. You remembered all the roles. I was hoping you'd forget one so that I could remind you, but you didn't. So the way you started the meeting, I thought that was a really good intro. One thing that is hard sometimes is remembering to lead the applause, and we do applaud a lot. But when we're bringing someone up and then when we're sending them back, remember to lead that applause. So Brian, with your evaluation, I give you so much credit for being able to do that. I am becoming so sentimental. I'm not even that old, but goodness, I don't know if I could evaluate because that was such an emotional speech for me. And you managed to also provide some good feedback for her. And when you were talking about the phone and the generational difference, what came to my mind was phone as a lifeline.
The only thing we can control. So that's the only thing that we're going to reach for, because we can't run, we can't get away. So we're going to do the one thing that we can control.
And then that phone also gets you out of that room. It gives you access to other things. And I must be young enough because my thought was I want my phone too. So. And then after the evaluation, Brian, you abandoned the podium, but I totally understand that given the emotional content of the evaluation and the speech. For our table topics, I love that it was inventive, and we haven't had a prop in a while. It obviously worked very well because our speeches went long. I do love that we included Larry, and our winner, too, of our table topics as a newer member. And I really want to stress and encourage that when we're doing table topics, we need to include our online, which you did, but we ran out of time. So let's include Svetlana when we're doing these to give her an opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Krista. And don't sit down because now I'd like to turn the meeting back over to our president, Sakule.
I just want to tell our evaluator that we don't have a podium.
Lectern! I have been getting so much better at that too. I even brought that up at work that it's a lectern, and we had a big debate, and I won. I had to prove to have won